Good morning. I call this hearing of the House Democratic Steering and Policy Committee to order. Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us for this really critical Steering and Policy Committee hearing. We are honored to be joined for a second time by our colleagues in the Democratic Women's Caucus, of which I am a proud member. I'm Debbie Wasserman Schultz, one of the three co-chairs of the Steering and Policy Committee. We are now on day 28 of the Republican shutdown, and yet another week of Speaker Johnson's inexplicable taxpayer-funded paid vacation for House Republicans. Meanwhile, millions more Americans opened their mailboxes this last week to see health coverage increase premium notices arriving with extremely difficult news. And instead of working with Democrats to fix the crisis they've created and reopen our government, Republicans are instead trying to ratchet up the pain that Americans will feel. This cruel and callous administration has made it clear they will not fully fund food assistance funding through SNAP in November through contingency funding, choosing instead to cut benefits for 42 million Americans. Of course, this is after Republicans already slashed SNAP by $186 billion this year in the Big Ugly Law, the largest cut to food assistance in American history. Also, millionaires, billionaires, and big corporations can have lavish permanent tax breaks. And while all of this comes to a head, Jeffrey Epstein's best friend in the White House jetted to the other side of the world to try and unravel the tariff chaos that he unleashed on working families and the global economy. Trump can't run far enough away or be further from the pain that he himself has caused. And Republicans can't make it any more clear that they just don't care what working Americans are up against right now. And I'm glad our witnesses and the DWC are here today to tell the true reality of this and what it means for women. Because women are the foundation of our care economy, and this vicious Republican agenda is about to crush us. The Republicans' agenda will rip coverage away from as many as 15 million Americans in their Big Ugly Law, and by letting these ACA-enhanced premium tax credits expire. And when hospitals close or Republicans push people off their Medicaid benefits and slash billions in future Medicare funds, it's women and working families who feel it first and worse. As a breast cancer survivor, I know that when women lose health care coverage because they can't afford it, that means they're going without vital screenings like mammograms so they can catch breast cancer early if they're going to have to face it. This means later stage diagnoses and more deaths from breast cancer. In the waning days of Breast Cancer Awareness Month, Republicans' refusal to negotiate with Democrats to prevent this is inexcusable. Instead of that agenda of cruelty and destruction, Democrats are fighting to strengthen our care economy. We want to raise the minimum wage and deliver on paid sick leave. We want tax breaks to go to families who need better daycare options, not billionaires shopping for a jet. We want to expand Medicare and Medicaid to provide vision and hearing coverage and offer help to families who struggle with the costs of long-term care without having to get rid of everything they own. But because of Republicans' billionaire protection racket, right now American families are gathering around kitchen tables to figure out how to pay for huge spikes in health care coverage. And for millions of them, the painful answer is that they will simply have to just go without it. My home state will get clobbered. Of the 25 congressional districts with the highest ACA enrollment, all but 8 are in Florida. The rest are all in red states, too. Over 80,000 people in my district are staring at the loss of health care coverage. 203,000 in my district will see their health care costs explode. But sadly, Republicans simply do not care. That's why we need to share the harsh truth of what's at stake, and we have an impressive roster of witnesses who will do just that this morning. These are people on the front lines helping to keep America healthy, working, and strong. And now I have the honor to yield to the Democratic leader who is leading our fight for more affordable coverage for all, Hakeem Jeffries. Leader?
Well, good morning. Thank you to our Steering and Policy Co-Chair, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, for convening us, for her leadership. It's an honor and a privilege to be here with all of you. Certainly thankful for Teresa Leger-Fernandez, who chairs the Democratic Women's Caucus, and all of the members of the DWC and the House Democratic Caucus who are here with us today. I'm appreciative of their continued effort, dedication, and resolve in fighting for the people that we are privileged to represent. Certainly grateful for the presence of our witnesses here today, Kristen, Jocelyn, Ijin, Maria, Taylor, Kenya, Brick, and Shauna. An all-star lineup of advocates and powerful voices on behalf of women, children, families, and the American people. We're thankful for your presence here today and sharing your stories about how they and everyone that you represent has been impacted by the national nightmare that Donald Trump and Republicans continue to visit on the American people. Donald Trump and Republicans began this year by promising to lower costs on day one. But costs haven't gone down. They're going up. Inflation is going up. Electricity bills are up. Housing costs are up. Groceries are up. Child care costs are up. The Trump tariffs are costing everyday Americans thousands of dollars in additional expenses per year. And now, in the midst of this full-blown affordability crisis, Republicans are refusing to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. Now, earlier this year, House and Senate Republicans, led by Donald Trump, jammed their one big, ugly bill down the throats of the American people and detonated the care economy. They imposed the largest cut to Medicaid in American history, which will make it increasingly difficult for caregivers to be paid for caring for their loved ones or to receive the medical care and benefits that they rely upon to survive. Republicans are causing hospitals, nursing homes, and community-based health centers to close all across the country, including in rural America. They've inflicted the largest cut to nutritional assistance, to SNAP, in American history, $186 billion in cuts, literally ripping food from the mouths of hungry children, women, families, seniors, and veterans all across the country. Now Donald Trump and his administration are sitting on a reserve fund that Congress had provided to cover SNAP benefits in the event of any lapse in appropriations. But instead of protecting the 42 million Americans who rely on SNAP for nutritional assistance, they are making these Americans confront hunger. In the wealthiest country in the history of the world, this should not be happening. It's a disgusting dereliction of duty. That's why we're here today, fighting for all of you, the American people, who are confronting this intense assault on the economy, on health care, on nutritional assistance, on women, children, and families, and on the American way of life. And House and Senate Democrats are united, and we are prepared to stay in this fight until we win this fight on behalf of the American people. So once again, thank you to our witnesses for your powerful advocacy and for your presence here today and the important testimony that you will provide. It's now my honor to yield to a tremendous champion for women and children and families and everyday Americans in the great state of New Mexico and throughout the country, the chair of the Democratic Women's Caucus, Teresa Leger Fernandez.
Thank you, Leader Jeffries, and I join in gratitude to each one of you who are here today and each one of my colleagues and the leadership at the Democratic Caucus, because we are here today because we truly care for the people we represent in our own districts and for every single family and every single corner of the United States of America, regardless of who you happen to have as your congressperson. I get to represent this beautiful rural district in New Mexico, and I also get to be chair of the amazing Democratic Women's Caucus. There are 96 Democratic women in Congress right now that are sworn in. We will have 97, a historic high, when we swear in Adelita Grijalva. And we are so thrilled to be co-hosting this hearing today because the women of this caucus and the men who support us understand that without the caregivers of this world, we couldn't be here today. women across this country need child care, Head Start, in-home care, and nursing home. Because without them, the duty and obligations to care for those we love would fall mostly on us, the women of America. And we could not go to work. We could not show up here to do our job today and every day in session. And I look out at today's panels and see people who represent and epitomize the most human element of our nature, caregivers, those who bring tenderness, understanding, and patience to the task of watching our children while we are at work, those who help our loved ones get out of bed, bathe, and take their medications in the home they don't want to and should not have to leave, and then those caregivers who show up every day at nursing homes and memory care facilities and create bonds with their patients that go beyond the manual task at hand. Caregivers who bring stability and friendship to the children with special needs and those with disabilities, and familiarity to Alzheimer's patients. But each of those caregivers also has needs of their own. They have bills, their own children and parents, their own rent to pay, and medications to buy. We spend a lot of time rightly and importantly talking about the number of people who will lose access to health care because of the Republicans' decision to prioritize billionaires. But today's hearing will focus on what those cuts mean to the caregivers themselves and those they care for. The reality is that Republicans' cuts to Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act hurt the caregiving economy and the caregiver's ability to pay his or her bills and health insurance costs. Trump and Republicans' cuts threaten both the people that are cared for and those who care for them. When a typical direct care aide earns a median of $25,000 a year, how will they afford health insurance that could go from, for the lowest plan, $27 a month to $130? What about those plans where you might have a larger family? It's going to go from $500 to $2,300. How do you afford that on what the caregivers earn? And if that home health aide or the caregiver gets sick and can't see a doctor and gets sidelined, what happens to the grandmother who needs her to show up, to help her get out of bed, to take her medications? We also know that women are the majority of unpaid caretakers. If a family can't afford home health care, long-term care, or child care, women are the ones who are most likely to leave the workforce to take on that responsibility. This year, over 330,000 women left the workforce. And much of that was because of the lack of care available for their loved ones, whether it was child care or elder care. Earlier this year, I met with two women. Each of them were named Virginia, up in the Taos Health Care Facility, a care facility that's threatened with the Medicaid cuts. Each of the Virginias were so thankful for the opportunity to be at that health care, and they told different stories. And they said at each time, I am sorry and I am worried that if I lose the ability to stay here, my family will take me in and my daughter will leave work. One of the Virginias needs somebody to help her take her seizure medication every day. Another one almost lost her leg because she wasn't taking her diabetes medicine. And these were wonderful Virginias. They were great. We all ended up singing Las Mañanitas to one of them because it was a birthday. And it was wonderful, and to think about what would happen if they weren't get the care they need. So that's why we are here, because we need a focus on both the caregivers and how we need you to be able to do your work, and how these Republican policies will destroy your ability to do the work you need to get done for us. We're all in this together. And Republicans' refuse to even show up is infuriating. In New Mexico, the legislature showed up and on a bipartisan basis passed a law to cover the tax credit cuts. I have written a letter to my Republican colleagues saying you should have the same courage as those Republicans did in New Mexico, but it's only temporary. We need Republicans to show up, to stand up for their voters, to have the same kind of courage they did in New Mexico. So thank you for being here today, and I want to turn this over to my wonderful Representative Del Bene, so that she can introduce Kristen Rowe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks. Good morning, everyone. And first, I just want to thank all of our incredible witnesses for being here today, for the work that you do to advocate for our care economy, to fight for health care for everyone, and protecting the Affordable Care Act. In my home state of Washington, 80,000 people are at risk of losing health care if Congress doesn't act to extend the enhanced premium tax credits for the Affordable Care Act. And I'm glad to be here for this incredibly important conversation. It is my privilege, though, today to introduce one of our great witnesses and my constituent, Kristen Rowe Finkbeiner. Kristen is the Executive Director and CEO of Moms Rising, where she works to increase family economic security and discrimination against women and mothers, and build a future where both businesses and families can thrive. Moms Rising is a grassroots organization with more than 1 million members that advocates for many of the policies that my Democratic colleagues and I regularly fight for: paid family leave, affordable child care, better childhood nutrition, and access to health care. In addition to her work with Moms Rising, Kristen hosts Breaking Through, a talk radio show. She's also an award-winning author of books and articles, frequent public speaker, and media contributor. She has received numerous accolades for her work, including the Spirit of Motherhood Award from the Maternity Care Coalition and the Washington State League of Women Voters Good in Government Award, just to name a few. I could go on for a long time here. Kristen, just thank you so much for your energy, your expertise, your advocacy, and tireless commitment to ensuring economic stability for moms and their families. We're so excited to have you here today. From our Washington to this Washington. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Representative Del Bene. Thank you also to Leader Jeffries, to Whip Clark, to Democratic Women's Caucus Chair, Representative Ledger Fernandez, and to all the distinguished members of Congress here today. Thank you, thank you, thank you. As you heard, I'm Kristen Rowe Finkbeiner, Executive Director of Moms Rising, and I'm honored to be able to share that we have 1.2 million members. People in every state in the nation, which actually adds up to 1 in every 300 people in America are an active member of Moms Rising at this time. People like Liddell in Nevada, who shared that if the ACA tax credits are cut off, then a lifeline for her family is cut off too. And this is causing her understandably great stress. Her daughter is battling breast cancer and is covered by the ACA. Liddell isn't alone. Brooke from New York recently shared, quote, "I'm scared. My husband and I both don't get insurance through our jobs, so if our ACA premiums go up, we simply won't be able to pay them. They will lose their health care entirely." We are in the middle of a national emergency, and we hear about it every single day. As you know, Republicans in Congress followed President Trump's demand by taking health care away from more than 17 million people in the big, bad, ugly bill, the largest Medicaid cuts in history. And right now, Republican leaders are threatening to keep our government shuttered unless they can increase, yes, increase, coverage premium costs for 24 million more. This situation is disastrous. Our nation absolutely can afford health care. But Trump and Republicans in Congress are cutting health care in order to pay for more tax breaks for billionaires and also to pay for terrifying, hardworking immigrants, people who are essential to our care workforce. 1/3 of the care workforce are immigrants, people who are essential to our families, to our economy, to our communities, and to our futures. This is nothing short of shameful. Our country needs safe and orderly immigration process that balances compassion and security, not cuts to healthcare, and most definitely not cruelty. If Republican leaders don't come back from vacation and finally sit down with the hard-working Democrats who are defending our health care, thank you, then health care costs are expected to skyrocket by an average of 75% and by up to 90% in many rural areas. On top of that, child care, which parents need to be able to go to work and children need to be able to learn and thrive, is also being defunded by Republican leaders. In less than 2 weeks, because of the Republican shutdown, Head Start programs serving more than 58,000 children face potential closure. Childcare is one of the fastest growing costs in our country, and Republican leaders are making it worse. But make no mistake, skyrocketing childcare costs hurt everyone. On average, the U.S. economy loses $122 billion a year due to lost wages and revenues when parents can't get the childcare they need. All of these rising costs are happening at the same time as vegetables are up 40%. Coffee, my personal favorite, is up 33%. Eggs are still expensive. Healthcare is surging, and the list goes on. Trumpflation is happening. Trumpflation is happening every day, and it really doesn't have to be this way. Solutions are possible. 42 million people are about to lose SNAP right as we come into Thanksgiving and have empty dinner plates. Trump's Department of Agriculture could and should use contingency funds for SNAP. In fact, there are solutions to all of these very real problems that open avenues for people to build good lives, to contribute to their communities, to raise their children, and that also strengthen the economy as a whole. Research shows that passing care infrastructure policies that Democrats have long fought for in very good ways, and that Republicans have long opposed in very bad ways, including health care, child care and elder care, paid family and medical leave, and fair pay for care workers, all together lower family costs and also boost businesses and the economy alike. These win-win solutions are supported by voters across the political spectrum. So on behalf of myself and the over 1 million members of Moms Rising, I want to thank the House Democratic Steering and Policy Committee and the Democratic Women's Caucus for standing up for moms and parents and for our economy. We know that when we stick together, we can build a better nation where every mom and family can access health care, where every person can get child care, food, housing, and elder care in an affordable way, where paid family and medical leave is available when people have a baby or a serious health crisis strikes, where every pregnant woman can get the high-quality, caring, and affordable maternity care we need, where the economy is strong, and where the only person wearing a crown is Lady Liberty. Later, you'll hear from 2 Moms Rising members who represent millions of hardworking moms trying to build good lives while facing these high costs, facing Trumpflation, and dealing with a broken care infrastructure and a health care system that Republicans in Congress are actively gutting. On behalf of them, on behalf of America's moms and families, I thank you for standing strong for our health, for our children's health, for our families' financial security, for our country, and for our futures. Thank you.
You, Kristen, you got us all fired up. I want to thank our hosts with the Steering and Policy Committee and the Democratic Women's Caucus and our leader, Hakeem Jeffries. And thank you to all of the witnesses who are here today. I am so grateful to have your perspectives at the table because families know what you know, that all of these issues are intertwined. The healthcare crisis, the child care crisis, the cost of living crisis, they are all part of the same ugly trend, and they all present real challenges to the care economy. Stagnating wages, rising costs, public services that are deeply and chronically underfunded, all amid unprecedented billionaire wealth. It has never been easy to get by as a parent or a caregiver, but now it is becoming virtually impossible. The math just simply doesn't work. 20% of counties in this country don't have a hospital. 35% don't have anywhere for a woman to give birth. Most Americans live in a child care desert. 60% of American households are struggling to provide the basics. And what have we seen as the Republican response to this? Tax groceries, deliberately withholding funding from SNAP, dismantle Head Start, defund Medicaid, hike ACA premiums, close more hospitals, make life harder and more expensive. While Trump gets a ballroom, Bezos gets a yacht, and crypto billionaires get a pardon and a tax cut to go with it. It is cruel and it is corrupt, and it disproportionately hurts two groups of people. One, the most vulnerable, the sick and the disabled, our children and our seniors. And two, it disproportionately hurts communities represented by Republicans, rural communities, poorer communities, communities with fewer hospitals, fewer child care centers, fewer lifelines, fewer jobs going into these unprecedented cuts. Open enrollment for the ACA starts this week, and millions of people are going to make a choice that they cannot afford health insurance for 2026. Mike Johnson should think about what this means for his own constituents. A single mom getting by on $40,000 a year in Mike Johnson's district will see her premiums nearly quadruple. Quadruple. Nobody can afford that kind of increase and that kind of pressure on a family budget. But it is not too late to stop that from happening. It is not too late to reopen the House. Democrats will be here ready to vote, ready to end this cruelty. And we are so grateful to be joined by all of you, but certainly by a champion and a leader for our country on the care economy and making sure that voices of workers and families are heard. And we are going to keep fighting alongside all of you, but especially our next witness, President Ai-jen Poo. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Whip Clark, for your leadership, your consistency, and thank you to Leader Jeffries and to our distinguished co-chairs and members of Congress for having us here and for continuing in this very crucial fight. I'm grateful to be here to speak about the reality facing working and middle-class families right now, families who are doing everything in their power to take care of the people they love, and they are living a care nightmare. In just a few days, more than 24 million of us will, on average, see our health care premiums more than double as we try to re-enroll in our insurance. Allowing the Affordable Care Act tax credits to expire will sever a lifeline that millions of caregiving families and workers rely on to afford health care. Over 7 million older adults, many of whom are family caregivers, will pay steep increases in their premiums, double or triple that of someone in their 20s. Disabled people, people who already incur health care expenses 5 times greater than those of non-disabled people, will face ballooning costs. This on top of the $1 trillion cut from Medicaid in the big, ugly budget bill that threatens care for 80 million Americans. Medicaid is also the primary payer of long-term care in the U.S., putting essential home care and other supports for older and disabled people and their caregivers at risk. A recent inflation report showed that prices for in-home care are already up 12% from last year. The tax credits made ACA plans more affordable for millions of people earning just enough not to be eligible for Medicaid, but not enough to pay the high cost of insurance. Taken together, these cuts put lives, health, and well-being of huge segments of the American workforce at risk. Direct care workers, in particular, I want to speak about especially. Direct care workers, make a median income of $25,000 per year, rarely get employment-based insurance, will lose one of the only safety nets in a precarious job. The expansion of the Affordable Care Act decreased the uninsured rate among direct care workers by 26%, a major milestone for a sector where nearly a third of workers had no coverage. The typical direct care worker enrolled in the ACA marketplace will now face average premium spikes of up to $1,070. Every single dollar counts for workers who earn wages so low that on any given week they're forced to choose between gas and milk, rent, and utilities. Meanwhile, the administration is also rolling back minimum wage and overtime protections for home care workers, as well as temporary protected status for immigrant care workers. Immigrants account for a third of our care workforce. As baby boomers age and we all live longer, there is in fact no way to provide the care that American families need without immigrants. And yet the very funds cut from Medicaid and our health care in the big bill are now being used to target and separate immigrant families, commit human rights abuses, and terrify the very workers we count on for our care. This all-out assault on our care workforce is an assault on caregiving families. When a care worker cannot afford to see a doctor or risks being separated from their own families in deportation every time they leave their home, they are forced to choose between their own safety and families and showing up for ours. Disabled children are losing their confidence, their connection to a full life in the community. People living with dementia who rely on familiarity for stability, losing their primary relationships of care. Care and dignity in our country are two sides of the same coin. We all have people we love who need care. The dangerous policy decisions being made by this administration and leadership in Congress are robbing us of our right to care for our loved ones, our right to care and our dignity. We should be expanding Medicare to cover long-term care. We should be fully funding Medicaid home and community-based services, raising wages for care workers, offering pathways to citizenship for immigrant care workers. We should be making childcare affordable for every family. And instead, we are taking away the only access to care that we have. We can create systems that enable families and workers to thrive, but not like this. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks to you, the Steering and Policy Committee, and the Democratic Women's Caucus for holding this important hearing today, and to the advocates and the storytellers who are joining us today, all of whom I have worked with on these issues for longer than I wish I could say that we had been doing it. You know, we're here because we need to be addressing these issues, and issues we've been working on for a long time are getting worse. Republicans haven't been in Washington for 5 weeks, and they don't seem to place a priority, want to sit down at a table and work this out for us. We're here. Democrats are fighting to urge an extension of the ACA enhanced premium tax credits and to create a comprehensive forward-looking vision for the future of health care. And as we are discussing this morning, the urgent need to bolster our care infrastructure. As you all have outlined so well, we have a caregiving crisis in this country, and the problems are complex and multiple. We know that we've got a serious caregiver shortage due to the demanding and low-paying jobs, staggering costs that lock out working families, as you both have eloquently talked about, and no one wants to talk about, our current immigration policy. And millions of Americans, mostly women, are giving up their careers, their savings, and their own health care for the people they love. The stress is serious, and it can be life-changing. And you don't know how broken the system is until you actually find yourself in it, and you're trying to fix it and go through a broken structure. I know, and I'm luckier than 99.9% of the people in this country. I know you guys, and I can call and ask for help. And yet that panic comes rushing back when you need to find a caregiver 24 hours and there's nobody there. And other families, they call agency after agency, only to hear there are no aides available, or that only the few that are, they can't afford. It's too expensive. Too many families don't have access and are struggling to fill the gap. Caregiving should not be a partisan issue. It's a human one for all of us. We have family and friends we love. Every one of us will either need care or provide it at some point in our life. And I thank all of you for the work that you're doing. It's my honor now to introduce Jocelyn Fry, who is president of the National Partnership for Women and Families. Under her leadership, the organization is focused on advancing economic justice, affordable and equitable health care, civil rights, and reproductive freedom for women who face the steepest barriers, including women of color, women with the lowest incomes, and women with disabilities and transgender women. Thank you for all you're doing, and let us hear from you.
Well, good morning, and thank you, Representative Dingell, really for your leadership and your powerful words. To Leader Jeffries and to the co-chairs, the leaders, the members present, thank you so much for convening us and for being here. I'm really honored to be here on behalf of the National Partnership for Women and Families and appreciate the chance to focus on the cost of care and the investments that women and families really need to be healthy and well. I also appreciate the opportunity to talk about the dangers posed by really an irresponsible and devastating healthcare cuts that congressional Republicans have put forward that are putting, quite frankly, too many families at risk. No one who has been paying attention should be surprised by the care challenges facing women. Every day, millions of families grapple with enormous caregiving and healthcare costs because America's care infrastructure is uneven, incomplete, and unresponsive. Women are often at the center of managing these costs for their families. They are the caregivers and the care coordinators. As a result, women often pay the heaviest price for our infrastructure policy failures. They lose income when they have to take unpaid time from work. They face more health risks when their health providers shut down. And they face unfair treatment because the care work that they do is deemed less valuable or a liability. This was true before COVID. It was true and exacerbated by COVID. And it remains true today. We know a lot about the solutions that can improve women's lives. Women need comprehensive, affordable, quality health care, and they need policies that help address their caregiving needs at work and at home. Yet the current administration and the Republican-led Congress are taking us in the wrong direction. They have pursued drastic cuts, weakening the baseline of protections provided through Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act. Women rely enormously on Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act to afford the care they need, including preventive, primary, and specialty care services. Cuts in funding will mean fewer mammograms, Pap tests, blood pressure checks, and directly jeopardize women's lives. Last year, an estimated 10 million women relied on the ACA's tax credits to afford care and to have their premium costs either reduced or eliminated altogether. Without these credits, their annual premiums could more than double. The risk of higher costs is particularly problematic for those who are pregnant In recent years, the average out-of-pocket cost for a woman giving birth was roughly $3,000 with insurance, but nearly $19,000 without insurance. Such increases are unconscionable, especially when our country already suffers the worst maternal health outcomes among all high-income nations. Healthcare cuts hurt women workers and weaken our entire economy. Ending the ACA's tax credits is projected to cost states almost $41 billion and to eliminate more than 300,000 jobs. Many of those lost jobs would be concentrated in healthcare, where women disproportionately work. All of these cuts occur in an environment that we know lacks critical care supports such as paid family leave and affordable child care. The result is more economic stress on families already facing income instability, especially as different groups of women are now experiencing historic declining labor force participation rates. New research that the National Partnership has coming out this week has found that mothers of young children, particularly Black mothers, are already experiencing historic labor force participation declines. Congress and our nation must do better. We can do better. We need more investments in caregiving and healthcare, not fewer. And we need to embrace an affirmative agenda. For women, where healthcare is accessible and affordable, where caregiving is valued and care needs are supported, and where our investments in care are understood as issues of equity and fairness. And on behalf of the National Partnership, we look forward to working with all of you to make the promise of these policies a reality for everyday Americans. Thank you.
Thank you, Jocelyn, for your testimony. House Democrats are here in Washington, D.C., working on behalf of the American people, and where are House Republicans? On vacation in the middle of the 5th week of the Republican shutdown. That is completely unacceptable. I want to thank Leader Jeffries, Whip Clark, Steering and Policy Co-Chair Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and Democratic Women's Caucus Chair Teresa Leger Fernandez for convening this important hearing on strengthening the care economy and protecting the Affordable Care Act. Millions and millions of Americans under the ACA are going to see their health care premiums rise. And in my district, analysis shows that a family of 4 could see their premiums rise by more than $12,000 annually. That is something that many people will no longer be able to afford. And the Republican assault on health care is not just on the ACA. It's also with deep cuts to Medicaid. There's now a $500 billion cut slated for Medicare. And what happens when lots of people no longer have health insurance? Well, I'll tell you what happens. They still get treated. When they get very sick, they go to the emergency room, and the hospital has to treat them under a law that Ronald Reagan signed, and then the costs of this uncompensated care get passed along to everybody else who has health insurance. So everyone's health insurance premiums start rising. It's time for Republicans to come back from their vacation and to work with Democrats on fixing this healthcare crisis that Republicans caused. It's now my great honor to introduce Maria Town, President and CEO of the American Association of People with Disabilities. Under her leadership, AAPD has been a national force in advancing the political and economic power of people with disabilities, ensuring that every voice is heard and every community included in our nation's progress. Before leading AAPD, Maria served as director of the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities in Houston, Texas, where she worked to expand local access, equity, and opportunity. She also brought her expertise to the Obama White House as Senior Associate Director in the Office of Public Engagement, managing outreach to the disability community and older Americans, and coordinating engagement across federal agencies. Earlier in her career, she served as a policy advisor at the Department of Labor's Office of Disability Employment Policy, leading initiatives to improve employment outcomes for youth and young adults with disabilities. Maria Town's work has consistently demonstrated that strengthening the care economy means investing in people, especially people with disabilities, caregivers, and the systems that allow all of us to thrive. We look forward to hearing from you, Maria.
Thank you so much, Congressman Liu. Thank you, Leader Jeffries, Whip Clark, and to the Steering and Policy Committee and the Democratic Women's Caucus for having me here today to represent the American Association of People with Disabilities an organization that represents the more than 70 million people with disabilities across the United States, most of whom rely on either Medicaid or the Affordable Care Act to live. These programs are a lifeline for disabled people. They have been a lifeline for me throughout the majority of my life. And I want to note, as I begin, that women are more likely to be disabled than men are, in part because women tend to live longer, and aging and disability go hand in hand. Poverty and disability are also inextricably linked. We like to say that poverty is both a cause and consequence of disability. And so when we think about disability in the context of the care economy, we are not only focusing on disabled people, we are talking about disabled women, many of whom live in poverty, whose poverty will only be increased if these ACA tax credits are not extended. We have made so much progress when it comes to the inclusion of disabled people in the United States. I would not be here without the Rehabilitation Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the Olmstead decision. But in my opinion, the greatest advancement of disability civil rights since the ADA 35 years ago was the Affordable Care Act, and continues to be. Disabled people have fought over and over and over again to protect and preserve the ACA, to prevent, replace, and repeal, and what we are seeing right now is replace and repeal under a different name. If the enhanced ACA tax credits are allowed to expire, the consequences will be severe. Over 4.8 million people could lose health insurance coverage entirely, and among those most at risk are people with disabilities, especially those who work independently and cannot access employer-sponsored insurance or earn just enough to be ineligible for Medicaid. Now, October is National Disability Employment Awareness Month, and people with disabilities face significant barriers in the traditional competitive job market. Entrepreneurship is often an employment strategy recommended for people with disabilities so that we can work on our own terms. These ACA tax credits make disabled entrepreneurship possible. Without them, we will not only see people lose health care, we will see disabled people lose the very jobs that they have fought tooth and nail to create for themselves. Disabled people rely on the ACA marketplace plans to afford personal care services, medications, rehabilitation, and durable medical equipment that help us live and work in our communities. Without these additional premiums, could rise dramatically overnight. Many will face the impossible choice of paying for health care, rent, or food, and others will simply lose coverage. Life is already more expensive for disabled people. We call it the disability tax, and research shows that everyday disabled people incur 28% higher everyday expenses than people without disabilities because we have to pay for things like transportation if we don't drive, or we have to pay to modify our vehicles in order to have accessible transportation. These rising costs are not a distant problem. Open enrollment begins this weekend, and right now people across the country are trying to decide whether they can afford to renew their plans. Due to inaction in Congress, millions are unsure whether they'll be able to keep their coverage come January, and if we fail to act, people will delay or skip signing up, and disabled people could face serious consequences almost immediately. Loss of critical medications, inability to work, eviction or homelessness, institutionalization, failing health, or death. And for me, these deaths are not theoretical. I cannot tell all of you how many friends I've already lost because they were not able to get the health care they needed to survive. We are already living in a completely inadequate system when it comes to meeting the health care and other care-related needs of our nation's most vulnerable. The ongoing underinvestment in our care infrastructure, including home and community-based services, the direct care workforce, and family caregiving supports, is completely unsustainable. The people who provide this care, including other disabled people, are truly the backbone of our economy. I'm surprised none of my other panelists haven't mentioned that care is the work that makes all other work possible, right? And yet they're often underpaid, undervalued, and unsupported. And in fact, many direct care workers lack health insurance through their employer, forcing many to rely on premium subsidies through the ACA. About 25% of all care workers depend on Medicaid for their health care coverage. Meanwhile, those who rely on those services, including millions of disabled people and older Americans, face long wait lists, inconsistent care, and no safety net when the system fails. A recent report from George Washington University noted that ending the enhanced premium tax credits will also lead to the loss of approximately 340,000 jobs, with at least half of them in the healthcare sector. Of these, 250,000 jobs will be lost in 10 states: Alabama, California, Florida, Georgia, my home state of Louisiana, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Texas. 7 of these states did not expand Medicaid. Combined with the recent severe cuts to Medicaid, this will create a critical situation that risks further destabilizing an already unstable system. This will mean even longer wait times for people who need to access care, including emergency care, and some will avoid going to the hospital altogether, choosing truly to just continue to suffer or die. This is more than a social issue. It's an economic one. It's a workforce issue. It's a moral issue. Every dollar invested in home and community-based services creates jobs, cuts reliance on costly institutional care, and keeps families and communities united. The care economy is a vital economic infrastructure, as important as roads, bridges, or broadband, because it allows people to go to work, school, and live in their communities. Lawmakers and advocates currently have a shared opportunity to create a system that benefits everyone, one that values care work, maintains independence, and boosts our economy. Protecting the ACA tax credits and investing in the care workforce are essential steps in that direction. All of you know that our policies rarely reflect the reality of American lives, and it should be our shared goal to ensure that the policies that inform our day-to-day lives actually match the realities we see. When we focus on care as a central force in informing our policies, we create smarter, fairer, and more effective policies. We develop the systems that address the needs of disabled people, aging adults, parents, families, and women across the country. My message today is straightforward. Maintaining affordable coverage and funding the care economy is not only sound policy, it is the right choice. The price of inaction will hit hardest those who already encounter the greatest obstacles, but the benefits of taking action will spread throughout the country, in every community, and in every constituency. Thank you for having me here today.
Thank you so much, Maria, and thank you to our panelists for your really critical testimony. Members, we'll begin the question period for panel 1. Panel 1 has to leave at 10:10, so the clock is right in front of you, as it is traditionally when we're in committee hearings. Please observe it. I will be very helpful to you in observing that 3-minute clock. And we'll start with our ranking member of the Rules Committee, Mr. McGovern.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for being here today. If the House of Representatives were functioning, we should be having a hearing about how we improve and expand our current healthcare system. But we haven't been in session now for over a month, and basically Mike Johnson has abolished the House of Representatives, and he has made himself irrelevant and pointless, and he has shrunk the speakership to the point where it's an echo of what it used to be, and that is so sad. But there are improvements that we need to make, and the United States has a higher maternal mortality rate than a majority of other high-income countries. Louisiana, that's where Speaker Johnson's home state is, has a maternal mortality rate of 41.9%. Almost half of women who give birth in the state of Louisiana die. That's horrifying. And many women are clearly failed by our current healthcare system and accessibility of care. So if the ACA enhanced premium tax credits expire, how do you expect it will affect maternal health and access to care? Maybe, Ms. Fry, I can ask you that question.
Well, thank you for the question. I mean, I think the short answer is the loss of health care is the last thing we should want, right? I mean, for maternal health, what women need is more, not less. What we see across the country, particularly in the South, disproportionately for Black women in particular, is that the lack of care, the lack of comprehensive care, means the rates go higher. What we also see is that it's a continuum of care, right? It's not just these cuts. These cuts are on top of a lot of policy failures. People have to travel further for care. Labor and delivery units are shutting down. We did a report over the summer that talked about an estimated 130, almost 140 labor and delivery units we expect to close because of the increased pressures on providers because of the loss of money for Medicaid cuts. So this is terrible.
Look, I mean, we can solve this immediate crisis pretty simply. Open up the government and refrain from doubling or tripling people's health care premiums. Mm-hmm. And then we should get into a discussion about how we can improve the current health care system, which I don't think is adequate. But I thank you all for your eloquence and your passion, and I hope people are listening because this is ridiculous that we're at this moment right now. I mean, we're the richest country in the history of the world. We should have the best health care system in the world, and here we are just arguing that they don't increase people's premiums. But I thank you all very much. I yield back.
Brilliant timing, Mr. McGovern.
I know.
Congresswoman Andrea Salinas from Oregon.
Thank you to the Steering and Policy Committee. Thank you, Chairwoman and Democratic Women's Caucus, and to our panelists today for this informative hearing. In particular, I want to talk about the impacts these cuts will have, as you've been talking about, on women. And I want to focus on one woman in my district in particular, Nancy. I met her last spring, and she works at home as a health worker in Salem, in my district. She earns a living by caring for her mother and aunt, who are both disabled and blind. Because Oregon is one of the many states that has expanded their Medicaid program, Nancy can earn a living by taking care of her mother and her aunt in their home instead of in a facility. However, because of the Republicans' steep cuts to Medicaid, the funding for Nancy's mother and aunt's care, which Nancy relies on for income, is now at terrible risk. Mm-hmm. So with Republicans' cuts to care, the ACA, Medicaid, Medicare, people like Nancy are going to face impossible choices. Will her mother and aunt remain at home receiving patchwork care from family members stretched thin, or will they end up in a more expensive care facility with strained, underpaid workforce that she probably won't be able to afford? Nancy's story is not unique. We're seeing this across the country. Millions of families and caregivers are going to have to face these impossible choices as a result of these Republicans' cruel cuts and short-sighted cuts to the ACA and Medicaid. And they're going to have an even bigger impact on middle-aged women who are in this sandwich generation, having to care for their children, having to care for their elderly parents. As you can see, I'm part of that generation and feeling this personally. And this is going to result in what? Women being forced out of the workforce, never to rejoin again, as we saw during COVID. In fact, in 2023, 87% of home health aides and 80% of personal care aides were women, and 5.5 million Americans utilize home-based care through Medicaid instead of institutional level care. These cuts are cruel and short-sighted, will disproportionately impact women who are at the core of the care economy. We know that Republicans need to come to the table. We need to rethink all of this, as my colleague just mentioned. But with that, my question is for Maria. I'm worried about access to care for the elderly and those people with disabilities. Can you explain how the Medicaid cuts, the ACA cuts, will put home health professionals out of work, strain capacity at care facilities, ultimately raise costs for our families?
Thank you for your question, Congresswoman Salinas. Medicaid is the only health insurance payer that covers long-term services and supports. It's the only health insurance payer for in-home, home and community-based services. The only option that families like your constituent have is Medicaid, to keep their families together. If these Medicaid cuts are allowed to proceed, we will see one of two things, depending on the family. We will see older adults forced out of the homes and communities that they love to go live in a costly institution like you've described, where we know they have worse outcomes. Their lives are literally shortened. And we know that the Trump administration has also started to cut the federal agencies and state service providers that provide oversight for nursing home facilities, meaning that we are at higher risk of abuse and neglect running rampant in these facilities. The other option that many families may choose is to keep their loved ones at home and be forced to survive in an extremely strained capacity, either choosing to forego critical medications for the caregiver themselves, because caregivers are often disabled themselves, or to scrimp and save on things like food and utilities. If I think about what this means for families in Louisiana and Texas, both places where I've lived, it means that they stop running the air conditioner in the summer, right, and face things like a heat emergency in their own home. These cuts are dire, and we cannot allow them to proceed.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you so much. Oregon is in the House. Congresswoman Suzanne Bonamici.
Well, thank you to the Steering and Policy Committee and the Democratic Women's Caucus and to the panelists. This is week 5 of the Republican-caused government shutdown, and they're still out on vacation. And as a reminder, we start with an already fragile healthcare system. Then in the big ugly bill, they put in massive cuts to Medicaid. And now they want us to lock in a policy that will end the premium tax credits that's going to raise costs for millions of Americans. I say to Oregonians and Americans, you deserve better. And I'm glad we're having this conversation today and highlighting what's happening. And I tell you, like Representative Salinas, I talked to people back home in Oregon. I just had a telephone town hall meeting. People are very concerned about this, including a lot of people who are concerned about what's going to happen to the care economy. I just spoke with Denise from Portland. She's very anxious about the fact that she might lose her caregiver. She's elderly and severely disabled. She is, again, filled with anxiety. Danielle has a 20-year-old disabled son who receives Medicaid in-home care services that allow him to live at home. And they're incredibly worried because he needs 24/7 care. And then John, whose son David is an adult with disabilities who's able to live independently now, but they're worried that might end with these cuts. So I have a question for Ms. Town also. With these Republican policies, especially these cuts to Medicaid and the increase in healthcare costs with the ACA tax credit that they want us to lock in, what does this mean to disabled people, and particularly their loss of access to direct support professional services?
As I've mentioned, it's a threat to our health and safety. It's a threat to our very lives. But I also want to name that it is a threat to the civil rights that we have fought for decades to secure. Disabled people had to get public accommodation written into law, right? Prior to the ADA, we had no right to public accommodation. We had no right to exist in public spaces. And prior to the Olmstead decision, just a few years after, forced institutionalization was really the basic practice of the land. With these cuts, we will see a return to institutions for disabled people. And I mean that disabled people of every age, older adults, and children. Right now in states like Florida, the state of Florida has had to be sued previously by the U.S. Department of Justice because they were telling parents of medically complex children, your child is too expensive to care for in the community. You have to send your child to a nursing home. More and more families are going to be faced with that reality. And I am so grateful that I grew up when I did, because my state was able to equip my single mom with the resources that she needed to have caregivers for me so that she could go to school and become a nurse and establish a career for our family. Families today will not be afforded the same opportunities that I was, nor that my mother was 30 years ago. That is not the way the future is supposed to work.
Thank you for highlighting that. I'm afraid I'm out of time, but no family in this country should have to go through that gut-wrenching decision. We're here to fight for the American people, and I appreciate you. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, colleagues, and thank you very much to our panel. We appreciate your expertise and the poignancy in which you've delivered your testimony. Thank you so much. As our panels transition from panel 1 to panel 2, Congresswoman Nakima Williams, when the panel gets settled, will be first up to introduce our first panelist. Congresswoman Williams of Georgia, you're recognized for an introduction.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. Even as my Republican colleagues are on vacation, as this Republican-forced government shutdown and healthcare crisis continues. Y'all, I am Congresswoman Nikema Williams, and I proudly represent Georgia's fighting 5th Congressional District, where we fight for caregivers, for our federal workers, and for the health care of the American people. It is my honor and privilege today to introduce you to one of those caregivers, Kenya Randall, a home care worker, grandmother of 3, and proud member of the We Dreamin' Black Coalition, a Black domestic workers group focused chapter of the National Domestic Workers Alliance. With decades of caregiving experience, Kenya embodies the compassion, resilience, and advocacy that define the domestic care workforce, women whose labor sustains families and communities every day. I think one of our previous panels put it simply, care work makes every other type of work possible. Her professional commitment to caregiving is deeply rooted in her personal life because Kenya is a primary caregiver for her 60-year-old sister who lives with multiple disabilities. Each day, she provides the essential support that her sister needs from managing medications to helping with daily tasks, ensuring that she can live with safety and dignity. Medicaid has been a cornerstone of that stability, covering vital treatment, mental health services, and medications that would otherwise be out of reach. Kenya's caregiving extends to the next generation as well, y'all. Her oldest grandchild, who has autism and ADHD, depends on Medicaid to access specialist care, therapy, and medications that make learning and growth possible. For Kenya, access to affordable health care, y'all, is not an abstract policy matter, but a lifeline that sustains her family's health, well-being, and future. Kenya, as your Congresswoman, I won't leave you, your sister, or your grandchild behind. I'm so glad that Kenya is here today to share her lived experience as a caregiver as House Democrats continue to fight on your behalf and on behalf of all Americans. Thank you, Kenya, and the floor is yours.
Thank you for having me. My name is Kenya Randall, and I sit before you as a proud Georgian Black woman, a grandmother, a mother, a sister, and a full-time caregiver. In my home, care is 24-hour reality. I'm a full-time caregiver to my 60-year-old sister, and I care for my 3 grandchildren. One of my grandchildren has autism and ADHD. My sister suffers from schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. This reality relies entirely on Medicaid to support caregiving needs to my family. This May, I came to D.C. to talk about the terrifying possibilities of Medicaid cuts. Today, that possibility is devastating reality, with nearly $1 trillion in cuts to Medicaid, which jeopardize the entire care economy if my sister or grandkids' Medicaid were cut. I honestly don't know what we would do. Medicaid is how they get their life savings care they need, and it is my only source of income to cover basic necessities for my family. And now I am back here to talk about myself and the millions of care workers who are the backbones of our economy. As caregivers, my sister, I make roughly $18,000 a year. I purchase my health care through the ACA market. I manage chronic conditions like diabetes and high blood pressure. I rely on my coverage to stay healthy. If the enhanced premium tax credit expires, my annual health care costs to project to increase by nearly $400 or more on top of already $3,000 I currently pay. To put it bluntly, I cannot afford the increase and would have to forego my coverage, entirely strictly my life with my unmanaged conditions, and become one of the estimated 4 million Americans who lose their health coverage. The reality is care workers do not get the health care or paid time off through our work. When I get sick, I can't afford to stop, and I certainly cannot care for my family. if I am not healthy, this reality for care workers who are majority women of color who shoulder the responsibilities of holding their families together when you threaten our health care and threaten our ability to keep caring for our children, our parents, and our disabled loved ones. Care workers deserve dignity, a living wage, benefits, and paid time off. But most urgently right now, we need affordable health care that does not force us to choose between our health and our jobs. This is why I urge people in power to restore economic security of caregivers and stop, shut down, and extend the enhanced ACA premium tax credit immediately. Thank you.
Congresswoman Stansberry for an introduction.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to say thank you and welcome to all of our guests who are joining us from all over the country today. It is my pleasure to introduce our next guest who is providing testimony. Mr. Brick Williams grew up in Cedar Hills, Utah. He's worked for 24 years as a guitar teacher, where he teaches 55 to 60 students a week and nurtures the next generation of musicians and instills in them his love of music. But as I'm sure he'll share with us today, he has his own daily struggle after being diagnosed at 19 with a common variable immune deficiency. Like so many Americans and small business people, his self-employment as a music teacher depends on the Affordable Care Act marketplace. And before Utah's high-risk insurance pool, of course, like so many small business people and Americans, could have lost everything. So we're really grateful that he is here today to share his story. And with that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Yeah, thank you. I genuinely appreciate the opportunity to be here and to share my story, and the chance to do this is a privilege. So, my name is Brick Williams. As was said, I'm from Cedar Hills, Utah. I was born with an immune deficiency disease. It's a genetic disease, and it's called common variable immune deficiency, CVID for short. It's a genetic disease in which the body doesn't produce the normal amount of antibodies, and I have less than 1% of a healthy person's immune system. So I can't fight infection like a typical normally healthy person would. I am susceptible to frequent infections, and some of them are difficult for my body to get rid of because of the lack of antibodies. The only way to increase the number of antibodies that I have is to receive infusions. And the infusions are made from plasma, and it requires a large number of plasma donors to make just one dose of the medicine that I take. The infusions provide me with other people's antibodies, and I've been doing the infusions for 29 years now. They're mandatory for me to stay alive and have a chance at being healthy. The infusions are expensive. The monthly statement for 2 infusions is $12,500. That is a staggering $150,000 a year that my infusions are. Needless to say, I have a lot of health problems. I reach my out-of-pocket maximum every single year in the month of January. Prior to the Affordable Care Act, I got insurance through a program called HIP Utah, and it was a very costly insurance, especially for a lower-income family like mine was at the time. And when the ACA came along, it dramatically changed my family's lives. For the first time, we could get affordable health care and an affordable health care plan. The financial difference that made for my family cannot be understated. It took a few years, but over the course of that time, since the inception of the ACA, our finances were able to get much more stabilized. The enhanced tax credits from the American Rescue Plan Act have been helping my family immensely by keeping the cost of premiums down. The one big beautiful bill, and I didn't really see anything very beautiful in there for someone like me, but it did not consider extending these credits, and I am in one of the demographics that the expiring credits will hurt the most. I have worked my way up in my self-employment to be between 300% and 400% of the federal poverty level. The American Rescue Plan Act got rid of the financial cliff of who gets subsidies. It also kept premiums at 8.5% of yearly income. Starting in 2026, anyone above 400% will no longer receive any subsidies for their health care, which will result in staggering premium increases for myself and other many other middle-class families. The American Rescue Plan Act was keeping insurance premiums capped at a reasonable percentage of yearly income, depending on how much a person makes per year. Also, because of the American Rescue Plan Act, we have seen a record number of people signing up for health insurance plans in recent years. There are now enough healthy people covered on ACA plans to stabilize the insurance market, which is why we've seen lower year-over-year premium increases in recent years. The enhanced tax credits, the removal of the subsidy cliff, and the cap on premiums have helped create a more balanced market where health care is more affordable. As of January 1st, 2026, all of these benefits are scheduled to go away, and as a direct result, premium prices are projected to spike like never before, not just for people near 400% of poverty level like me, but across the board. This is because of speculative premium increases. The projection from health insurers and industry professionals is that healthy people will see the price increases and they will bail out of the marketplace, since the risk of sickness isn't worth the steep premiums that they will have to pay. Those remaining in the marketplace will by nature be the less healthy portion of the population, which will tax the system, creating a spiral. The fewer healthy people that are in the market, the more imbalanced the system will become, which will cause premiums to continue to increase dramatically each year moving forward. In the short term, industry professionals warn that without intervention, individuals like me will be forced to choose between crippling insurance premium prices or having no coverage at all, which in my case is deadly. The Affordable Care Act had previously stabilized the insurance system, but the failure to address these impending issues is poised to destabilize it. This will have a profound and long-term consequence that's going to impact many, many Americans for decades, possibly. Eventually, even those who are currently young and healthy will age and require costly medical care. While many Americans may feel like they can afford to take the risk of not being insured for now, none of us can stay young and healthy forever. My fear is that by the time these people need health care, the system will have collapsed completely. Therefore, ensuring health care affordability now is crucial for those with current needs, as well as today's young and healthy people who will become more in need of health care as they age. I need the ACA to remain affordable. I was born with a disease, and I shouldn't get punished so severely financially for that, because the disease itself is punishment enough.
Thank you so much. Congresswoman McClellan from Virginia for an introduction.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, and thank you to the Steering and Policy Committee and the Democratic Women's Caucus for convening this critically important hearing. And I want to thank the members of the panel for sharing your stories today and really putting a face on what we're fighting for. We are at day 28 of a government shutdown because Republicans would rather shut down the government than address the health care crisis of their own making. And in Virginia, we are suffering. Families are hurting. And I want to introduce one of the individuals affected by the attacks. But first, I want to highlight something that was said on the prior panel by Mrs. Town. She said how Congress needs to adopt policies that reflect reality. I think maybe if more than 7% of members of Congress were mothers of young children, we would actually adopt policies that helped families. As one of those mothers of young children, I want to introduce another one, Ms. Taylor Moyer. Taylor is a devoted single mom of 3 young boys, ages 2, 3, and 7. She lives in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and after spending several years out of the workforce due to the child care crisis, Taylor recently started a new job and is working hard to rebuild her family's financial stability. Despite her determination and steady employment, rising costs for housing, food, childcare, and beyond have made her family's budget extremely tight. For Taylor, Medicaid ensures that her children can see doctors, receive preventative care, and get the medical attention that they need. Without it, she says her family would struggle to access even basic health care. In addition to Medicaid, Taylor also relies on SNAP and WIC benefits to put healthy, nutritious food on the table for her growing boys. All of that is now at risk, as the Trump administration and congressional Republicans stand in the way of ensuring costs stay down and relief goes to those who need it. While they make the biggest cuts to Medicaid and SNAP in American history, and while they refuse to use billions of dollars in contingency funds to extend funding for the SNAP program, even though President Trump can send $20 billion to Argentina and is trying to send another $20 billion. I want to thank Taylor for braving both 64 and I-95 to be here to tell her story today.
I'm Taylor Moyer, and I live in Virginia Beach with my 3 bright, amazing sons who are 2, 4, and 8, and all 4 of us rely on Medicaid for our health care. I'm a proud member of Moms Rising, and I thank you guys for the chance to share my story here today. When I became a single mom of 3, playing catch-up like so many other moms, I was pushed out of the workforce due to child care crisis. Everything was a struggle. I took a job at a local nonprofit because I had to provide for my kids, but without child care assistance, I could barely keep up. I applied but waited months for relief, and when I finally got approved, it helped, but not enough. Even with the assistance, I still pay $600 for only 2 weeks out of the month. For childcare, it's a constant balancing act just for us to stay afloat. As the cost of food and other essentials has soared, it's been harder and harder for my family to make ends meet. WIC is essential, and it helps me provide a balanced, healthy diet for my children. With 3 growing boys, the nutritious options that WIC supports are a blessing, and I'm thankful that I can choose from a variety of dairy, fruits, and vegetables that I'd normally say no to because our budget is really tight right now. Without WIC, I'd have no choice but to feed my kids cheap filling options like ramen, they love it, but can't have that every night, and affordable, shelf-stable foods that aren't as healthy. I hope that lawmakers will ensure that WIC funding continues, because every child and mother should have access to healthy food. As I said, my family relies on Medicaid for our health care, and it's no exaggeration to say it's a lifeline for my children and me. After my youngest son was born 2 years ago, Medicaid was the reason that I was able to access physical therapy for birth complications and counseling. Without Medicaid, I would have gone without care like I have done in the past, because I really needed it. When I really needed it. Medicaid dental coverage for my boys is also a huge help, and I could have never afforded to pay for their dental coverage out of pocket. They would just go without it. A lot of families do go without dental care because when you're choosing between putting food on the table or going to the dentist, most families are going to choose food. But dental care is essential to our children's health. Even with Medicaid, accessing health care is enormous, sometimes insurmountable challenge. For instance, the clinic that I used to rely on no longer accepts Medicaid. And because so many health care providers in my area don't accept it, finding care is a struggle. Even now, more cuts to Medicaid looming, the program doesn't cover all of our needs. I need eyeglasses, but I can't find it. I worry that the deep cuts to Medicaid that Congress passed will make these problems even worse. Lawmakers should be looking for ways to improve our care, not cutting programs that help us build good lives. On behalf of my family and so many others, I thank all of you who are working to strengthen our care economy and protect our health. So many hardworking families like mine are barely scraping by. We're terrified about what the cuts to Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act premium tax credits will mean for us, and we are desperate for solutions for our country's child and elder care crisis. For my family, the looming health care cuts are an emergency. I don't understand why Republicans and so many private donors are spending hundreds of millions of dollars on a ballroom while the health care of my sons and I and so many others rely on is on the chopping block. Families like mine want Congress to reverse the reckless and damaging cuts to Medicaid and extend the premium tax credits that make health insurance affordable for tens of millions of us. At my job, I see every day how the issue affects people from all walks of life, not just one group, but everyone. My peers, my coworkers, and the people that we serve are all struggling. We're hardworking, We're serving our communities, yet the government isn't holding up its end. Working class families can relate. So many working class families can relate. But how many elected leaders have ever worried about putting food on the table or paying for their children's care? That's a reality that so many of us know way too well. Our children are our future leaders, thinkers, and innovators. Please make meeting their needs and keeping families healthy a top priority. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Taylor. And now my classmate and colleague, Congresswoman Gwen Moore from Wisconsin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am just blown away listening to this panel. And before I introduce my guests, I just want to make a comment about the folks that are sitting in front of me. Madam Chair, these are the people, Kenya and Brick and Taylor, that the Republicans want us to throw under the bus to pass a so-called clean CR. You know, Kenya, sister, I guess, would have to go into a nursing home since Medicaid would not be there to provide any sort of in-home health care. Brick, you've already told us what your fate would be. And you are also, you know, the ACA. I don't know how you would be able to afford any kind of plan. And Taylor, I can just see the pain. And I'm thinking about those 3 kids, you know, and trying to raise 3 kids as a single parent. I tell you, it's just sort of, the flashbacks are not comfortable. I am so honored to introduce a fellow Wisconsinite here today. Before I do, I just want to say to the 3 of you, you're nothing. Your profiles are nothing like the profile that the Republicans have shared with us of the people who no longer deserve health care. You know, Madam Chair, where's the boy in the basement playing video games, calling upstairs saying, Mama, bring me some more potato chips? I just thought for sure we would see that person on this panel. It is such an honor to introduce a cheesehead, a badger. You know, a badger is an animal that just grabs on and fights to the very end. Shauna Verstegen is a fitness trainer and a lifelong advocate for equity and wellness. Just as a little background, her passion for advocacy began in high school when she challenged gender barriers in athletics and her frustration that girls weren't allowed to pole vault. My brother he still has records for pole vaulting. So she just joined the boys track team and became the first female pole vaulter in Madison, Wisconsin. And she made history, again, at the University of Wisconsin-Madison as a pole vaulter. Now, she has channeled that same determination into helping others achieve their health and fitness goals. She and her husband, Peter, who is a massage therapist, work side by side at a small community-oriented gym where supporting others on their health and fitness journeys is at the heart of what they do. She's a business owner, and this is really important, Madam Chair, with regard to our discussion of the ACA. You know, here's an example of somebody who, with her credentials, her and her husband's, could have gone to work for some sort of physical therapy organization where, you know, people would have to have insurance and it would have to be authorized by the insurance to be paid for, and they'd have to be evaluated by, you know, medical people. You know, and there are plenty of people out there, you know, who, unlike me, I'm just speaking for a friend, you know, who are pre-diabetic, who are overweight, who have neck and back and spinal problems, and they really need people to help negotiate them through their health crisis. And to have people available and to be affordable to take, just speaking for a friend, not to, you know, because As you can see, Shauna, I'm in perfect health. She and her husband have 2 sons, Grayson and Clark. And they were able to get out of the job lock and form their own business by having the advanced premium tax credits. So their monthly premium, telling your business here, $460 a month. And the tax credit covered another $800. With costs rising, Shauna has become vocal, speaking about how vital it is for middle-class families with kids to have this credit. We're going to hear from Shauna, but she was paying $460, and the premium tax credits covered another $800. So $460 plus $800, do the math, that's $1,260 a month. Shauna, tell us how you're going to negotiate this without the premium tax credits.
Absolutely. Good morning. And thank you so much for that very kind introduction, Representative Moore. Thank you for the opportunity to share my family's story here today. My name is Shauna Verstegen, and as you heard, I'm a Badger, and I come from Madison, Wisconsin, with my husband and our 2 wonderful little boys who are 7 and 10 years old. I'm also a proud member of Moms Rising. I'm here today to thank you for fighting to continue the Affordable Care Act premium tax credits. Like so many other working families, I don't know what my family would do without them. My husband and I both work in the fitness industry as trainers and group fitness instructors, and as you heard, he's a massage therapist at a wonderful small gym in Madison, Wisconsin. We love our jobs, and we both work very hard helping others on a daily basis. We've been employed there since high school, so almost 30 years now. Due to the small number of full-time employees at our gym, the owners are unable to provide us with health insurance. So we purchased health coverage for our family through the ACA marketplace for many years. Every year, the price of coverage has risen significantly. The enhanced premium tax credits make a huge difference for us. As you heard, we pay about $460 each month for our family of 4. The tax credit covers the other $800. And it's truly the difference between my family having health care or going without. Even at that high price, our plan has a deductible of $14,000, and we've been forced to take on medical debt. We're still paying off a major hip reconstruction surgery that I needed 2 years ago, which our portion of that bill was $20,000. The out-of-pocket payments leading up to and including the birth of our second son totaled over $19,000. We've taken out a home equity line of credit to help us pay for these medical bills. The large deductible forces us to make many tough choices and strongly consider all of our healthcare decisions. Recently, our younger son hurt his ankle at gymnastics practice, and I'm embarrassed to say we sat and had a discussion of whether or not to take him in for an x-ray. Wow. Of course, in the end, we did, but that cost us $350. Losing the premium tax credit support at the same time premiums are expected to rise significantly would create a real crisis for my family. Trust me, we've already cut back on our spending in every way we know how. Along with adding additional work hours to both of our schedules, we rarely go out to eat, and any sort of vacation has been out of the question for several years. For 2026, unfortunately, we're looking at scaling back some of the sports and activities that our kids enjoy. If the subsidy ends, we'll need to cut another $10,000 to $12,000 out of our budget. And we don't know where that would come from. We're exploring all of our options. My husband is even considering finding another job that offers employer-sponsored health coverage. That's been really emotional for us because while we're certainly not above working at a large retailer like Costco, it would mean setting aside the skills he went to college for and the work he truly loves. We are also considering shopping for a cheaper plan, but that would most likely have an even higher deductible, and that's risky for our financial stability. However, with 2 kids, I certainly don't feel comfortable going without health insurance coverage altogether. These options and decisions are tough and, quite frankly, really scary. We are a middle class, and I want to emphasize, very healthy family. And like so many others, we're struggling to make ends meet with prices for food, housing, clothing, electricity, and everything else skyrocketing. We were promised lower costs, but that certainly hasn't happened. In fact, prices continue to rise, making it more and more difficult to keep our heads above water as we continue going deeper into debt. The prospect of our health insurance premiums more than doubling is devastating. It would be a major financial blow to my family. This isn't about politics or polling or winners and losers in Congress. This affects families in every district, red, blue, and everywhere in between. It's about real families, real kids, and all of our health. I truly cannot thank you all enough for fighting to continue the Affordable Care Act premium tax credits, which my family and 24 million other Americans urgently need. Thank you for prioritizing our needs, our well-being, and of course, our health.
Thank you so much, Shauna, and thank you to all of our panelists for your testimony. Members, a reminder, our clock is set at 3 minutes, just like it is, just like we are timed in our regular committee hearings, and I will helpfully assist you in complying with staying within that time. So first up is Congressman Stephen Horsford from the great state of Nevada.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair, and to the other co-chairs of the Steering and Policy Committee, as well as Leader Jeffries and Whip Clark, for hosting this really very important hearing on the Republican-fueled healthcare crisis. I don't even know where to begin, because we are just days away from a deadline that is keeping people up at night, that is stressing people out. You have individuals like our witnesses here today who are doing everything that they can to get ahead and to provide for their families and loved ones, and yet this administration and Republicans in Congress are making it harder for them, not easier. And starting this Saturday, working people and families all across the country will have to evaluate and choose their health care options for the upcoming year. And as you've articulated, it is not going to be an easy one no matter what. But this year, because of the Republican inaction, the enrollment period will be even more stressful and burdensome. Some may even have to go without health care altogether, which to me is a false choice. Unlike our Republican counterparts, who once again have chosen to extend their taxpayer-funded vacations, they are MIA. But we're here. We've shown up because we know this is our job. And I would just compel Speaker Johnson, do your job. Open the doors of Congress. Let your conference return to D.C. so that we can do the will of the people, one way or the other. Open the government, protect workers, save health care, and lower cost. That's what we're asking for. Now, Ms. Randall, your family's connection to Medicaid reminds me of a story that I heard from Tiffany in Hawthorne, Nevada, which is a rural part of my district on the outskirts, center of Nevada. She shared that her son's life depends on Medicaid, and without it, he would not survive because he would lose access to the life-sustaining care that he needs. I understand that both your older sister and eldest grandchild also depend on Medicaid for critical health care. So you're in that sandwich generation. You're dealing with family members on the top end and on the younger end. I can relate to that right now. In your testimony, you described how Medicaid has provided your family with stability, something that might not have been possible otherwise. So, Ms. Randall, you've come before this Congress time and again to plead with lawmakers not to cut Medicaid and to share their real-life consequences that those cuts would have. After Republicans have continued to ignore your pleas, how do you find the courage to keep coming back and sharing what is needed and to advocate on behalf of your family and millions of other Americans who are in similar situations?
I keep coming back because I care, and what others to get the things they deserve and want. And only because I've gone out to the Republicans in Georgia, but they realize there's a problem, but yet there's no solution. And that's why I keep coming.
Thank you for showing up.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Congressman Horsford. Congresswoman Deborah Ross from North Carolina.
Can you hear me? Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair, and thank you so much to the witnesses for sharing your real and very raw experiences. I met with families just like yours in North Carolina last week when I was home and heard their stories. And North Carolina just recently expanded Medicaid. So imagine how hard that was. It was like Ms. Randall, who hasn't had the full benefit of Medicaid in Georgia. I want to highlight just one of those stories for all of us today to show the stakes of this healthcare crisis. One of my constituents, Mary Mack Jenkins, came to visit me. She's a member of the North Carolina Council on Developmental Disabilities. But more importantly, she's the mother of 9-year-old Miles, who lives with spastic quadriplegic cerebral palsy. Miles requires round-the-clock, 24/7 care, most of which is provided by nurses and paid for by Medicaid. He's formed wonderful relationships with many of these incredible nurses who actually stay in the Jenkins home overnight. And they have cared for him over many years. But even before the passage of the big, ugly law, the Jenkins family dealt with gaps, interruptions, and delays in finding nursing care from a care economy that is just simply stretched, sometimes for months at a time. And this was due to high turnover and longstanding pressures on the nursing workforce. Because of the big, ugly law that fundamentally has been shifting the cost of health care and many Medicaid costs to the states, North Carolina has already been forced to cut Medicaid reimbursement for nurses by 3%. These cuts may be even deeper because of the new Medicaid requirements. This is putting strain on families like Ms. Randall's, like Ms. Moyer's, like all of your families. And it is putting strain on the care economy. Disproportionately, the care economy is women. So at the same time that your families are struggling and women are forced to make these horrible decisions, Congress is cutting the pay of our female caregivers. Congress is cutting child care benefits for our female care recipients. Head Start is closing doors. And this is falling on the women in America. I want to thank all of you for being here, having the courage to stand up to this cruelty. And remember, it's all just to give tax breaks to billionaires. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Ross. Next up, Congresswoman Luz Rivas from California.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the Steering and Policy Committee and the Democratic Women's Caucus for organizing this important hearing today. And I want to thank everyone on the panel for sharing their stories with us today. Today marks 4 weeks since Republicans chose to shut down the government rather than help working Americans like yourselves. I've been hearing from my constituents in California that have similar stories like yours. I want to highlight a particular constituent story of mine, Miss Ann Chris from North Hollywood. Through her current plan, through Covered California, Miss Chris pays $400 per month for health insurance and pays out of pocket until her $6,500 deductible is met. Now that's already very expensive, but if Republicans let the Affordable Care Act's tax credits expire, her new plan will be $900 per month. She cannot afford this 125% increase on a fixed income. I heard from many other constituents that in addition to their healthcare premiums increasing, their co-pays are also increasing. And not just the primary care visit co-pays, their prescription co-pays. It all adds up to thousands of dollars more per year for basic health care. And, I've talked to one constituent last week that has a chronic disease. She needs to go in for more visits. And she's very concerned that she's not going to be able to afford health care. And many constituents in my district, which is California's 29th district in Los Angeles, are in similar situations and are hurting because of Republicans' refusal to extend the ACA's tax credits that have allowed people like yourself to care for your family. Ms. Randall, I want to thank you so much for being here and sharing your story. You mentioned that if the tax credits expire, you may have to forego your coverage entirely and risk worsening your chronic health conditions. Can you please expand how your health worsening would impact your care responsibilities for your grandchildren and sister?
Yes. If I don't have care for myself, I can't care for the ones that I love. And that means they will have to go without as well.
So many Americans are in your situation, and that's why it's important for you to be here. Thank you for sharing that story and highlighting the importance of why we can't let these tax credits expire. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Rivas. Congressman Mike Thompson from California as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for holding the hearing. Witnesses, thank you all very, very much for being here. What compelling stories you've shared with us. And I've got to say, what I heard today is reflective of the stories that I hear from my constituents at home. I probably have a million questions I could ask you, but I think we'll be preaching to the choir here in this room. So I'm going to take my time to talk to Speaker Mike Johnson. And I just want to say, Mr. Speaker, the government's been shut down now for 5 weeks. Hard-working men and women are working without pay. Everything from important folks in the public sector to even our interns have been furloughed. Important policies are stalled because you, Mike Johnson, refused to call the House back into session. Telehealth has been ended and stopped, and there's no session to extend this. We don't have a farm bill. Food security programs are going without funding, and of course the ACA tax cuts, our tax credits, are done as well. This is unacceptable, and under your leadership, Speaker Johnson, you've caused a health care crisis. Even Marjorie Taylor Greene is telling you this, and still you do nothing. You sent a bill to the U.S. Senate that cannot muster the votes to pass. Bring back the Republicans, reconvene the House, and let's do the work that the people across the country have sent us to do, instead of blaming others. And your blame game is just unbelievable. What do? You blame for your shortcomings undocumented immigrants. Well, Mr. Speaker, your story's full of prunes. Under the ACA, you cannot sign up if you're undocumented. And all ACA applicants are vetted through, wait for it, everyone who signs up for the ACA is vetted through Homeland Security. So if your claims are true, call the House back. Let's take care of all these pending policy issues important to the American people. And we can call in Secretary Noem and have her explain to us why she's not doing her job vetting these ACA applications. We just heard in the news, your state, Madam Chair, Florida, is seeing these incredible increases. My state, California, is beginning to get notices. And in my state, their ACA premiums are going to go up by 97%. Mr. Speaker, we're watching a train wreck, and you're doing nothing about it. Bring back the House. Let's do our job. Yield back.
Thank you for those statesman-like words, Mr. Thompson. I mean that in the literal sense. Congresswoman Shontel Brown from the state of Ohio.
you, Madam Chairwoman. Every day, millions of Americans are tasked with the role of supporting their friends, loved ones, and neighbors through caregiving. These individuals have become one of the great unseen pillars of our society while revealing a gap in how we both value and support them. In Ohio alone, there are more than 1.5 million Americans who serve as caregivers for their loved ones, providing an estimated $21 billion in unpaid care each year. Many do so without adequate financial, emotional, or social support. Organizations like the Domestic Workers Alliance aim to uplift and protect these individuals. Through initiatives like We Dream in Black, marginalized groups are given a seat at the table where they strengthen the workforce, support communities, and shape the next generation of leaders. Ms. Randall, thank you for joining us today and for your commitment to uplifting the work of caregivers across the nation. Can you please speak to some of the challenges that Black caregivers face and how we as members of Congress can work to eliminate some of these barriers?
Well, sorry. I've watched my sister have numerous of an exchange of caregivers to care for her. And hearing her cries, I said, let's see how I can help. And me helping, meaning I took on that role to provide that care for her because I got tired of her saying, this is not working. I don't like seeing new faces every day, different people in and out. So I stepped up to do that for her. But also, if I don't do it, I don't see no one else doing it. And that's why I care. So I step up to the plate to provide that for her.
Thank you so much. Medicaid serves as a lifeline for many families and allows them to get the support they need for their loved ones. Without it, millions of Americans will be forced to make difficult decisions regarding treatment and access to care. And Ms. Randall, I know you've touched on this, but I just want, if you'd like to share a little bit more about, as a caregiver, you know firsthand the obstacles that many families face when seeking support. If Medicaid coverage were reduced, how might this impact your family or your ability to provide care?
It would mean I would probably forego my insurance because it wouldn't be affordable and I would have to do without. But also, I would try to manage, but it's not foreseeable because of the wages. Well, not wages, because of the increase in premiums.
Thank you for sharing. I think we can all agree no one should have to choose between putting food on their table and providing quality care for their most vulnerable family members. Thank you for sharing your story today. And with that, Madam Chairwoman, I yield back.
Thank you, Congresswoman Brown. Our former emergency room doc and gentleman from California, Congressman Dr. Raul Ruiz.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thanks to the Steering and Policy and Democratic Women Caucus for hosting this important conversation and hearing. As an emergency medicine physician, I have treated patients from all walks of life, and let me tell you, I've seen devastating consequences that occur when patients delay seeking the medical care they need. There was a gentleman from the Coachella Valley, a farm worker who I saw during a health fair who hadn't been able to see a physician, and while he was able to get free care at this health fair, he presented with years of lower back pain and difficulty urinating. It started with difficulty urinating, then it progressed to back pain. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, worst case scenario as an emergency physician, he probably had prostate cancer that grew, and because he didn't identify it, it metastasized to his lumbar spine. And at that point, it becomes very difficult to treat. So it could be life-threatening. And that is why it's so important that we continue fighting to ensure our patients, our constituents have access to resources to mitigate the skyrocketing cost of health care. Millions of families rely on the ACA enhanced premium tax credits to afford care and will be forced to make very difficult decisions if these tax credits expire. In my district, some of my constituents are already facing a $1,500 a month increase in their premiums. That's $18,000 a year. A year in this economy when costs are still rising. Mr. Williams, thank you for sharing your story earlier. Prior to the ACA, can you describe what the process of getting health care coverage was like with your pre-existing condition, and how has the option to enroll in the ACA plan helped your ability to afford care and manage your health?
Yeah, the pre-existing condition thing was a huge problem for people like me. I got insurance through a program, like I said earlier, called HIP Utah, and it was fairly costly for someone in my economic bracket at the time. And I could have got on a federal HIP program, but I would have had to gone 6 months without being treated.
Yeah.
Because they wouldn't allow you to switch over unless you went 6 months without being insured. So I would have had to risk, and I either get the infusions and stay alive or I don't. I mean, it was a mess.
Your condition, you need these infusions. If not, you can die from a infectious disease.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, how long does a person live if you have 1% of an immune system?
Yeah.
Yeah. These infusions keep me
so
alive.
If these tax credits expire, what does it mean for you and your family?
So, because we're floating near that financial cliff in the level that we're at with my income, if we go over that, I mean, we're talking about a possible 650% increase in my premium. Yeah. So we've been doing the math. We won't know until Saturday when the actual open enrollment begins. But I mean, we're looking at 250% increase. But if I go over that 400% cliff, well, then it's unbelievable.
Will you be able to afford your mortgage?
No, it would be my health care would be more than my mortgage. Yeah, and we tried for 19 years to get a home.
Oh, man.
We tried for 19 years to get a home, and honestly, the reason we got a home was because of the ACA.
We're fighting for you and all the Americans who are in similar conditions, and for working people to lower the costs, open the government, protect health care, and prevent health care from skyrocketing. That's what we're doing for you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Congressman Ruiz. Next up, Congresswoman Mary Gay Scanlon of Pennsylvania.
Thank you so much, and thank you for convening this really important hearing. The Capitol is really quiet today when it should be bustling. I mean, there's a lot of important work that Congress should be doing for everyone in our country, but our Republican colleagues have abandoned their jobs for over a month now. They decided they would rather shut down the government than work with Democrats to protect health care, wages, and food security that millions of Americans depend upon. When we talk about the cost of care, as we are in this hearing today, we're talking about economic security, particularly for women and working families. We're talking about the nurses, the home health care aides, the child care workers, and the family members who shoulder care responsibilities and really are the backbone of our economy, but they are way undervalued and underpaid and overworked. As a result, they are so underpaid that far too many of our care workers depend upon Medicaid and SNAP, food stamps, in order to make ends meet. 2 out of every 5 child care workers depend on Medicaid and SNAP. Almost half of nursing home and healthcare workers depend upon Medicaid and SNAP. And then, of course, even more depend upon the ACA, the exchange healthcare policies. But if Congress doesn't extend the Affordable Care Act enhanced premium tax credits and fix the really drastic cuts it's made to Medicaid and SNAP, then these challenges are only going to deepen for people across this country. We know premiums are going to skyrocket, caregivers are going to lose coverage, and smaller providers, small businesses may not survive. And we've seen what happens when our healthcare system is on the brink. In my district, just this summer, we had our major hospital system go bankrupt. And now we see, families having to drive further for care, waiting longer to be seen, paying more, or not being able to access care when they need it. So now food assistance is on the chopping block too. The White House has announced that because Republicans have refused to negotiate a budget that works for everybody, the White House is going to block SNAP benefits for 42 million Americans on November 1st. That includes 16 million children, 8 million seniors, and 4 million people with disabilities. Never before have SNAP benefits been missed because of a government shutdown. That's because Congress set up a rainy day fund with billions of dollars to fund SNAP during emergencies, including during a shutdown. But the Trump administration is choosing to block the use of the rainy day funds. No White House has ever made the choice to block SNAP payments and let kids go hungry during a shutdown until now. So think about what that means for our neighbors, people in communities all across America. I heard recently from a woman named Tawny. She's a recently retired veteran in my district. Her Social Security check barely covers her rent and basic utilities. She's going to go hungry unless she receives her SNAP benefits in November. And it's close to home in a lot of ways. I have a young relative who has a small child, and as she was pursuing her nursing degree, she was working in a nursing home. She got her health insurance she got her health insurance from Medicaid because she was not well paid. Medicaid saved her life when she had a health emergency, and that took her months to diagnose and treat. So her situation seems kind of similar to yours, Ms. Moyer, in that you've got a young family, you're working hard, but not getting paid enough to completely cover all of those expenses. Can you talk about what it means to have access to
Congresswoman Scanlon, your time is long since
I'm so sorry. Can Ms. Moyer just offer one thing quickly?
Quickly.
To put it simple, moms are resourceful, but when you're cutting resources, we're going to go without. That means that my children are going to go without meals. That means that we're going to diagnose at home, not go to the doctor, maybe miss life-threatening things that could be going on with us, mental health and so many other things. So cutting these things, specifically SNAP, is going to mean that Thanksgiving might not happen this year.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you very much. Next up is Congresswoman Emily Randall from the state of Washington.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For 28 days, our Republican colleagues have refused to negotiate with us and instead have chosen to keep the government shut down. 28 days where the 27,000 federal workers in my district haven't gotten paid. And at the end of this week, as we have been discussing, 115,000 of folks in Washington's 6th district will not receive SNAP benefits. 3,200 kids in Washington will lose Head Start benefits, and the 27,000 federal workers will miss another paycheck. I spent last week back in our Washington talking to those who are being impacted, federal workers who have had to turn to the food bank for the first time ever because they're missing a paycheck and trying to figure out how to get by. I talked to one spouse of a federal worker whose husband just went into the hospital, whose teenage autistic son was with her, and she's trying to navigate how to do her education requirements to finish her certificate program, to be able to help provide for their family in a bigger way while taking care of her kid, while showing up at the hospital, while getting to the food bank to get food on the table. And that's just one example of so many stories like all of yours of folks who are impacted. Michelle from Pierce County shared with me the importance of Medicaid to her and her family. Her older son was a college student, and after he turned 26, he had to find his own health care. But thank goodness that he qualified for Apple Health. Last year, at age 27, he had a stroke. He's very healthy. He runs marathons. It happened because there was a small hole in his heart since birth that they were not aware of. He got prompt care and got clot-busting drugs in the emergency department quickly and has no lasting effects. He spent several days in the ICU and a few months later had a procedure to close the hole in his heart. If he hadn't had Apple Health, he would have ended in bankruptcy. That story, again, is like so many others, folks who rely on health care to survive. And right now we are seeing the Republicans refuse to show up for us, for you. And Mr. Williams, your story is similar to so many of these stories. And November 1st is just a few days away. Open enrollment will start. You'll have to make very difficult decisions if Republicans do not act to immediately extend the ACA tax credits. How does it feel to you that your Republican representatives in Utah are not showing up to vote for health care access?
Yeah, it's actually pretty disturbing. I'm trying to set up meetings with them later today with both senators from Utah, and I have one today later this afternoon with Mike Lee's chief of staff, and these are problems that need to be addressed. And I think what's going to happen real shortly is as soon as open enrollment begins, there's going to be a lot of people writing those senators, and they're going to be saying, hey, something is going on here, because they're going to be in utter shock at the rise in their premium costs. And I think a lot of Americans don't realize, I don't think they know what's coming, but come Saturday when open enrollment begins, they're going to see, and then those senators are going to be in they're going to be inundated with calls and letters, and this is a massive problem that I don't know that enough people have caught wind of yet.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Randall. Congressman Tim Kennedy of New York.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman. I want to thank the Democratic leadership, Democratic Women's Caucus, and the Steering and Policy Committee, including Chair Wasserman Schultz, Kelly, and Barajan for convening today's hearing, sounding the alarm on this healthcare crisis. I want to also thank this extraordinary panel. It's very courageous of you to share your very personal stories and extremely powerful in this moment. Your stories serve as a reminder for what our nation stands to lose if Republicans get their way and continue with this manufactured health care crisis that is totally avoidable and totally preventable. A manufactured assault on our economy, a manufactured health care crisis, manufactured attack on our workforce that support our communities, all manufactured by Trump and congressional Republicans. $1 trillion in health care cuts. It'll force clinic closures and mass staff layoffs, denying patients access to life-saving care. Failure to extend health care tax credits, leaving millions of people without insurance, resulting in more uncompensated care and strained workforces. Canceled coverage that'll hurt the care economy from birth to end-of-life services, impacting early intervention for infants, placing 1 in 4 nursing homes at risk of closure. I'm an occupational therapist. As an OT, I've seen firsthand how strengthening federal support for these services has a direct impact on the ability of those care providers to allow for early intervention services and preschool services that enable children to reach their highest potential and to be on the same level or potentially behind their peers going into preschool or kindergarten if that care isn't available. We know what Medicaid cuts will do to early intervention care. We saw when the state of Texas slashed Medicaid just over a decade ago, enrollment in early intervention was plummeted by double digits. So we know that children with disabilities and families that are providing for those children are all going to suffer. And we know that these are real life consequences that are what's at stake. Ms. Moyer, you shared a very powerful story of your family and your sons who relied on physical therapy. What would happen if those services were not available for your family?
We've been in a spot where we didn't have services before, and it's been a lot of just us neglecting our health in multiple ways, and not taking care of our bodies and nourishing our bodies the way that we should. So if things go back to that again, it'll be a lot of us self-diagnosing at home and hoping for the best, going without. That's what would happen.
That's unacceptable, and we can do better. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Congressman Kennedy. Congressman Brad Schneider from Illinois.
Ron, thank you, and I want to thank our witnesses for bravely sharing your stories with us today. It's important not just that we, but the American people hear what you have to say and understand what we're fighting for. We're fighting for Americans' health care, but which is also part of the American dream. And the American dream is about giving our children and our grandchildren the bright future they deserve and what we should want for every American. It's not just about making ends meet. It's about getting ahead and securing our future. Americans want a growing economy and healthy and safe neighborhoods. And health care is fundamental to that, and it's why we're here. It's why we're fighting to get this government reopened and health care protected, and it's why we wish our Republican colleagues would join us. Affordable health care means more Americans can return to the workforce, as was discussed, and even start their own businesses, like the four of you have all talked about. More than 10% of our workforce is self-employed, like Mr. Williams. More than 90% of American businesses are small businesses, like where Mrs. Verstegen works. 60 million people work in small businesses in this country. 60 million. It's 45% of our overall workforce. And more than half the job growth in the economy comes from small businesses and self-employed, people who grab the ring, seek to grab the ring of the American dream. According to KFF, the Kaiser Family Foundation, nearly half of the adults with Affordable Care Act or ACA marketplace insurance are either small business owners, small business employees, or self-employed. And as Mr. Thompson eloquently said, all we are asking here is that our Republican colleagues come back to Washington, D.C., and Speaker Johnson simply reopen the House and let us vote. Let us vote and take action to protect health care for millions of Americans across this country. It couldn't be more easy to describe. But the Republicans are hiding, and they're hiding from the people like you. So as we come to a close, and I'll start with you, Ms. Verstegen, why is it so important, again, just in a word or two, why is it important that your kids get the health care they need?
Well, I do want to point out that small business employees and small business owners are essential to our economy. And it makes me so sad that my husband and I are considering fleeing our small business for health care for our children. And obviously we cannot go without. We cannot see our kids' health suffer. So we will do whatever we absolutely have to. And that could come at risk of our small business that is such a gem and so special to us.
And Ms. Moyer, you said you're working at a nonprofit, but tell me what it means for your kids to have that insurance.
It just means that they get the care that they deserve, everybody else deserves. I think that it's not a luxury to have care. That's not a luxury, that's a necessity. So without it, of course, we're all going to be going through it.
And Madam Chair, if I have a couple seconds, Mr. Williams and Ms. Randall, if you can touch on it as well.
Yeah, I mean, small businesses are a huge group of people who sign up for care through the ACA. And if they're going to be thrown under the bus, a lot of those people live in rural America in red areas, and they're going to have a real rude awakening real soon.
Ms. Randall?
I just feel like if they don't have what they need, they can't grow the way they need to grow to have the stability of making sure they're healthy.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you so much, Congressman Snyder. Congressman James Walkinshaw of Virginia.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being with us today. Last week, my constituent Lindsay testified here about her son, Calvin, who was born with multiple disabilities. And Lindsay told us how Medicaid made it possible for Calvin to get the early intervention services that have changed the trajectory of his life, and how the $1 trillion in cuts to Medicaid that were part of the big ugly bill would put his care at risk. And families like hers and families like yours remind us what is truly at stake, our efforts to protect access to affordable and quality health care. And look, we all know the reasons that Speaker Johnson continues to extend the congressional Republican vacation. Among other things, he knows that refusing to even consider bipartisan negotiations to prevent health care costs from skyrocketing for the American people is indefensible. And what is the most urgent action needed today to prevent those health care costs from skyrocketing? It's extending the Enhanced Affordable Care Act tax credits that help millions of Americans afford quality coverage. And those credits have helped the Affordable Care Act achieve record enrollment and record savings for American families. But we also have to make sure that no one takes for granted the unjust status quo that the Affordable Care Act eliminated. And I want to thank all of you, especially Mr. Williams, for highlighting that today. Before the Affordable Care Act, folks faced a harsh market where insurers regularly denied Americans coverage because of their pre-existing conditions. Insurers could cap the amount of care a family could receive in a year or even in a lifetime. They could abandon parents to bankruptcy because their child happened to have a complex or chronic illness. And look, I think Republicans here in Congress have conveniently forgotten that it wasn't that long ago that insurance companies failed to cover essential health benefits, including maternity care, prescription drugs, mental health services, and more. And the Affordable Care Act changed that. And look, one of the ways I know that Republicans are starting to feel some heat from their constituents about these skyrocketing health care cost increases that are looming over the heads of the American people is they're starting to talk about what their package would look like to extend the premium tax credits. Now, I get nervous when Washington Republicans start putting their heads together about health care because they usually come up with new and creative ways to take health care away from working families. But they are feeling the heat from their constituents like you all. They voted 70 times to repeal or gut the Affordable Care Act. Each time, their efforts would have taken coverage and protections away from millions of people. I want to thank you all for being here and speaking with us in a loud and clear voice that we're not going to go back to the days when getting sick meant going broke in this country. We're not going to allow healthcare costs to skyrocket for millions of American families, including yours. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you so much, Congressman Walkinshaw. And now, to help close us out, the chair of the Democratic Women's Caucus, Congresswoman Teresa Leger Fernandez.
Muchísimas gracias por eso y muchísimas gracias a todos ustedes. Thank you so very much for coming and sharing your stories with us. You know, I kept this close by because I knew they might make me cry, which they should. We should always cry for that which we love deeply. And I think that each of us in your story shared how much you love your families and your communities and the need to keep them healthy. And as I sat and listened to your stories and the earlier panels and those that came from my colleagues, I said, we're talking about the care economy. And I don't understand why Republicans don't seem to care. This is about care. And they should be caring for their voters because let's recap some of what we heard. In the states that are going to lose the most jobs if we gut our health care economy, those are Republican states. 9 of 10 of the states that are going to lose the most health care jobs are states led by Republicans. We know that the majority of people who receive the tax credits for the Affordable Care Act live in districts and states where they have elected Republican senators or congresspeople, as you pointed out, Mr. Williams. They live in places like Utah, and Democrats want you in Utah to get the Affordable Care Act and the Medicaid that is needed, right? I represent a rural area. Rural areas often are represented by Republicans, and that's where we're going to lose our clinics and our hospitals. It does not make any sense that Republicans don't care because their voters are going to hurt. And I think that what we're seeing is that the Trumpflation, as was described earlier, is hurting everybody. And we need to come back and do what is right by the American people because the Republicans' attacks are raising costs. They're reducing care. They're cutting jobs. They are increasing hopelessness and increasing despair. And I think that's something that we cannot lose track of, that we need to come back and do what is right so that we can increase the the sense of optimism and possibility that should exist in the United States of America. And I commit to you that the Democratic Caucus is going to keep fighting for you, and the Democratic Women's Caucus is going to keep the issue of women and families and how we carry this at center. And we're going to fight like heck against this effort to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, because this is what it is, but yet by another name. And with that, thank you so much for leading this steering and policy hearing, and I yield back.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and I also want to thank you all for your incredibly moving testimony. I want to thank the DWC for assisting us in organizing such powerful witnesses. These stories should be heard in bipartisan committee hearings. Mm-hmm. That is where this hearing should have taken place, so that we can hammer out solutions together to solve this Republican-caused crisis. Instead, House Republicans are continuing their taxpayer-funded vacation, refusing to address the urgent food and health care crisis that is unfolding before us, with real people really facing harm. And the reason that we're in this situation is simple and clear. Republicans just don't care. There's no other explanation. Republicans don't care about a mom like Taylor, who works full-time and will be prevented from taking her kids to a doctor with the tax credits expiring and horrific Medicaid cuts. Taylor, I remember when my kids were your age, were your kids' age. I remember when I was your age. And it doesn't feel like that long ago. I just can't imagine each of your situations, and the fact that it is entirely preventable and created out of partisan indifference is revolting. Republicans surely don't care about a grandmother like you, Kenya. It breaks my heart, caring for grandchildren and other family members who Republicans clearly don't care if they force to make choices between health care, affordability, and whether your family is going to eat. This paid and unpaid child care, elder care, health care, and teaching that women do every single day keeps this nation running. It always has. But that essential work is just not sustainable when a doctor and decent food and housing are pushed further out of reach for millions of Americans. The women who make America run can't take 4-week vacations that are paid or even unpaid, like our Republican House colleagues are doing. They can't just sit on rainy day funds and refuse to feed 42 million hungry seniors, veterans, and children like this cruel president is planning to do. Indeed, no care economy workers or those who are cared for by them have the luxury to make such cruel decisions, and frankly, they'd never even consider it, as Kenya really poignantly said. It doesn't have to be this way. This is a partisan manufactured crisis because Republicans don't care. We must keep, and we will keep, pushing our Republican colleagues to sit down with us and solve this. This isn't a my way or the highway situation. We are ready, willing, and able to sit down and work through these issues and find a way to compromise. But you can't do that by yourself. I've been a legislator for a long time. I know that when you're sitting alone at the negotiating table, it is impossible to reach an agreement. We demand, on behalf of our constituents and Republicans' constituents, that they come back to work, that they do their damn job. And we must continue to demand that quality food, health care, and the essentials of daily living remain accessible and affordable to all of us, not just a privileged few. And with that, this hearing of the Steering and Policy Committee of the Democratic Caucus is adjourned.